podcasts. At the 2026 Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, a crowd watched a wheeled humanoid robot roll into a mock kitchen, open a refrigerator, pull out milk, slide a tray of croissants into a smart oven, and then just casually fold laundry on the counter. That robot, LG's Clello Wid, did all of that without a human touching a single button. Today, we're breaking down the future of consumer robots, specifically what the market actually looks like right now, what's driving this humanoid wave, and the ethical questions that nobody has clean answers to yet. By the end of this episode, you'll understand where this industry is genuinely headed and why it matters way beyond your Roomba. Joining me is someone who has been deep in this space, so let's get into it. What is actually happening with consumer robots right now?
So the first thing worth establishing is what we even mean by consumer robots, because people hear robot and immediately picture something from a sci-fi movie. But consumer robotics is actually this really broad category. We're talking vacuum cleaners, floor cleaners, lawn mowing robots, pool cleaning robots, personal assistant robots, companion robots, educational robots, anything designed for personal or domestic use.
Right, so it's not just humanoids, it's the stuff people already have in their homes.
Exactly. And the history here is actually kind of fascinating. The dream of a machine doing your chores goes back to ancient Greek automata and Victorian mechanical servants. This is not a new idea. But the first real robots showed up in 1960s factories, not kitchens. Then in the 1980s and 90s, companies tried home robots, expensive toys that mopped floors or served drinks, and they flopped because sensors were bad and prices were way too high.
So what actually changed? What flipped the switch?
Cheap microprocessors, networked sensors, and advances in AI. According to Technalyze, the real revolution came when those three things converged. And by the 2010s, the Roomba proved that autonomy could be both useful and affordable. That was kind of the gateway moment. Once people had a robot vacuum, the idea of a robot in the home stopped feeling weird.
The Roomba as the gateway drug to consumer robotics. I love that framing.
It really is. And here's where the numbers get interesting. According to Fortune Business Insights, the global consumer robotics market was valued at about $13.85 billion in 2025, and it's projected to grow from $17.37 billion this year to $105.81 billion by 2034. That's a compound annual growth rate of over 25%.
Wait, from $13 billion to over $100 billion in under a decade?
Yeah, and multiple research firms are landing in that same ballpark. Grandview Research puts the 2030 projection at $40 billion. The business research company has it at $70 billion by 2030. The exact number varies by methodology, but the direction is the same. This market is growing fast.
And who's actually buying these things? Like, is this still a niche tech enthusiast thing, or is it going mainstream?
It's going mainstream faster than most people realize. According to Fortune Business Insights, more than 69% of connected households in the US already use at least one automated smart device with robotic functionality. Robotic vacuum cleaners and smart security robots are dominating household adoption in urban areas right now.
So most people listening to this probably already have some version of a consumer robot in their home and just don't think of it that way.
Exactly. And the drivers behind this growth are pretty consistent across the research. Rising demand for home automation, increasing dual-income households where people have less time for chores, trining manufacturing costs, and the expansion of smart home ecosystems. Robots with Wi-Fi and Bluetooth can now integrate with smart appliances, security systems, personal devices, the whole connected home.
Okay, so that's the foundation. But let's talk about what's actually new and exciting, because the Cloid demo at CES felt like a different category entirely from a Roomba.
Yeah, that's the humanoid wave, and it's a genuinely different thing. Cloid, LG's robot, has 7 degree of freedom arms and 5-fingered hands. It uses a vision language model to interpret scenes and translate instructions into physical actions. It can interact through generative voice assistants and a connected app. According to Technalyze, LG hasn't announced production plans yet, but the demo signaled a real turning point.
So it's still a concept at this point, not something you can buy.
For Cleloid, yes. But other companies are further along. Figure AI and 1X Technologies both announced pre-orders for their humanoids, Figure 3 and Neo, in 2025, with deliveries targeted for 2026. And Time magazine named Figure 3 among the best inventions of 2025. It can fold clothes and load a dishwasher.
Folding clothes. That's the one that always gets me. That's genuinely hard, like even for humans who don't want to do it.
It's deceptively complex, right? Soft, irregular objects in unpredictable configurations, that's a nightmare for robotic systems. The fact that Figure 3 can do it with help is actually a significant technical milestone.
And then there's the Beijing half marathon story, which I have to ask about because it sounds almost absurd.
So the 2026 Beijing Humanoid Robot Half Marathon just concluded, and according to IDC, it showed significant advancements compared to the 2025 event in scale, technical complexity, and ecosystem participation. Over 100 teams from enterprises, universities, and research institutions competed, and some robots surpassed human-level running speeds.
Robots running faster than humans in a half marathon. That's a sentence I was not prepared to say in 2026.
And what's really telling is what the competition was actually testing. It's moved beyond basic mobility. 38% of participating teams used fully autonomous navigation, no human guidance. The winning robot leveraged that capability under weighted scoring rules. These robots are now being evaluated on their ability to operate reliably in complex, dynamic environments.
So it's not just can it walk anymore, it's can it navigate the real world on its own.
Right. And the technology enabling that is multimodal perception, robots combining satellite positioning, LiDAR, vision systems, and inertial measurement units, all with real-time mapping. That's what lets them handle slopes, sharp turns, uneven terrain, dynamic obstacles. According to IDC, this reflects the industry's accelerating transition toward commercialization.
Okay, here's something I find genuinely interesting. You mentioned the gaming industry earlier in passing. What's the connection there?
This is one of those things that doesn't get enough attention. According to Stanford's AI 100 roadmap research, low-cost 3D sensors originally developed for gaming platforms are what made affordable home robot perception possible. The gaming industry essentially subsidized the sensor technology that consumer robots now rely on. Without cheap depth sensors from gaming, a lot of this wouldn't be economically viable.
So your Xbox Kinect was secretly a robotics R&D project.
Kind of, yeah. And the Stanford roadmap also points to chip producers like NVIDIA and Qualcomm creating system-on-chip components that offer more power than supercomputers from 10 years ago, with 64 cores, specialized silicon for camera drivers, and processors for AI algorithms. Low-cost devices can now support more embedded AI than was ever possible in the past 20 years.
That's a wild reframe. The hardware that makes this possible has been getting cheaper and more powerful for years, and we're just now hitting the point where it's viable for consumer products.
Exactly. And IDC projects global humanoid robot shipments will exceed 510,000 units by 2030 at a compound annual growth rate of nearly 95%. That's not the whole consumer robotics market, that's just humanoids specifically. The broader market is growing alongside it.
Okay, let's shift to something I think is underexplored in most conversations about this. Who actually wants these robots, and for what? Because I feel like the marketing always shows a happy family with a robot assistant, but the reality of adoption is probably more complicated.
There's actually really interesting research on this. A study published in FHIFLY Access in January 2025 by Minjun Kim looked at 400 participants in South Korea and examined how perceived usefulness for different tasks affects the intention to adopt home service robots. And the findings are kind of counterintuitive.
Counterintuitive how?
So, basic household chores and leisure and companionship tasks both significantly drove adoption intent across all household types. But perceived usefulness for complex household chores actually had a negative effect on adoption intent, meaning people who thought robots could handle complex tasks were less likely to want them. And healthcare tasks varied depending on whether you lived alone or with others.
Wait, so people who thought the robot could do more were less likely to want it? That's backwards from what I'd expect.
It suggests there's something about the complexity of the task that makes people uncomfortable delegating it to a machine. Like, vacuuming, sure, let the robot do it. But something more involved? People get hesitant. There's a trust threshold that hasn't been crossed yet for more complex tasks.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. And what about the companionship angle? Because that feels like a whole separate conversation.
It really is. Intuition Robotics released LEQ3, a tabletop companion robot and caregiver platform specifically designed to connect seniors with loved ones and monitor health remotely. According to Technalyze, this is part of a broader trend where robots are being positioned as caregivers and companions, not just task doers. And with an aging population, that's a massive market.
And Grandview research specifically called out the aging population as a key demand driver, social and assistive robots for elderly care and companionship.
Right. And that's where it gets philosophically interesting. A paper published in Frontiers in Robotics and AI in April 2026 by Jana Sedlakova from Oxford's Ethox Center argues that we're expanding the moral sphere to non-human artificial agents for the first time in history. We've expanded it to animals before, but never to something we created ourselves.
That's a genuinely heavy idea. Like, what does it mean to have a moral relationship with something you built?
And Sedlakova's argument is that we need to stop framing robot ethics through a purely human lens. The questions, is AI conscious or is AI empathetic? She says those questions risk obscuring more than they reveal because they're forcing a human framework onto something that isn't human. We need new frameworks that understand robots on their own terms.
Okay, but let's get practical for a second because there are more immediate ethical questions than consciousness. Like, what happens when a robot in your home does something wrong?
The accountability gap. This is one of the most hotly debated issues in robotics ethics right now. If an autonomous robot causes harm, who is responsible? The company that designed the hardware? The developers who built the AI? The operator who deployed it? The end user? According to Robotics and Automation News, nobody has a clean answer to that question.
And we've seen how messy that gets in other industries. Tesla and autopilot is the obvious example.
Exactly. And then there's the bias problem. AI bias is well documented, but when it's embedded in a physical robot, it manifests in real-world interactions. Service robots in hospitals or retail environments might respond differently to people of different genders, ages, or ethnicities. Delivery robots could prioritize certain neighborhoods over others. The European Parliament's Special Committee on AI has explicitly warned that bias in algorithms, if left unchecked, can lead to discrimination and exclusion in automated decision-making.
So the bias isn't just a software problem anymore, it becomes a physical, embodied problem.
That's exactly the right way to put it. And the ETF3 has published something called Ethically Aligned Design, a set of guidelines to help engineers build robotic systems that prioritize human values. But guidelines are voluntary. The regulatory frameworks are still way behind the technology.
Which is kind of the story of every major technology, right? The tech moves faster than the rules.
Always. And with consumer robots, the stakes are higher because these things are in your home. They're around your kids, your elderly parents, your most private spaces. The trust question is enormous.
And yet people are clearly buying in. The market numbers don't lie.
They are. And I think part of what's driving that is the smart home ecosystem effect. According to Grandview research, robots with Wi-Fi and Bluetooth can now integrate with smart appliances, security systems, and personal devices. Once you're already in a smart home ecosystem, adding a robot feels like a natural extension rather than a leap.
It's like the Roomba effect at scale. Once you have one thing, the next thing feels less weird.
And the cost curve is moving in the right direction. According to the business research company, declining robot manufacturing costs are one of the key historical growth drivers. The hardware is getting cheaper, the AI is getting better, and the use cases are expanding. That's a compounding effect.
Let me push back on something, though, because I think there's a version of this conversation that gets overly optimistic. The CES demo was incredible, but LG hasn't announced production plans for Cleluid. Figure 3 can fold clothes with help. The Beijing robots ran fast, but 38% using autonomous navigation means 62% didn't. How much of this is still demoware?
That's a fair and important pushback. Stanford's AI 100 roadmap was pretty honest about this. Technical burdens and the high price of mechanical components still limit robot applications. The complexity of market-ready hardware may slow development. There's a real gap between what robots can do in controlled demonstrations and what they can do reliably in the chaos of a real home.
Real homes are messy, literally and figuratively.
Exactly. And the ETF Access study found that people's willingness to adopt varies significantly by household composition. Single-person households and multi-person households have different needs and different comfort levels. There's no one-size-fits-all robot. The market has to segment and specialize, which takes time.
So the optimistic headline and the cautious reality can both be true at the same time.
That's the most accurate framing. The trajectory is real and the growth is real, but the timeline for humanoids becoming genuinely mainstream household fixtures is probably longer than the hype suggests. The vacuum robots and lawnmowers, those are already mainstream. The humanoid assistant that can do everything? That's still a few years out, at minimum.
And in the meantime, the companion robot space might actually move faster than the task-doing space. Because LIQ3 doesn't need to fold laundry, it just needs to connect people.
That's a really sharp observation. The companionship use case has a lower technical bar and a massive unmet need, especially for elderly populations living alone. And the IFRD Access research showed companionship tasks were a significant driver of adoption intent across all household types. That market could scale faster than people expect.
Okay, so here's what this really comes down to when you step back from all of it.
Yeah, I think the big picture is this. Consumer robots are no longer a novelty category. The market is real, the growth is real, and the technology is accelerating on multiple fronts simultaneously: AI, sensors, chips, connectivity. But the industry is running ahead of two things that really matter: the regulatory frameworks that would answer questions like who's responsible when something goes wrong, and the social frameworks that would help us understand what it actually means to live alongside machines that perceive, decide, and act.
And those two gaps, the legal and the social, are not small problems.
They're not. The Oxford researcher Jana Sedlakova's point is really important here. We can't just map human ethical frameworks onto robots and call it done. We need genuinely new thinking. And that thinking is happening, but slowly. The European Parliament is flagging bias risks. The IGFEF is publishing design guidelines. But governments and regulators are, as Robotics and Automation News put it, scrambling to define rules of the road while companies race ahead.
So the consumer robot future is coming, whether we're ready or not.
And the people who understand what's actually happening, the real capabilities, the real limitations, the real ethical stakes, are going to be in a much better position to navigate it. Whether you're a consumer deciding what to bring into your home, a policymaker trying to write sensible rules, or someone building these systems.
Here's what I keep coming back to, the CES croissant moment. LG's Cleloid made breakfast and folded laundry in front of a crowd, and it was genuinely stunning. But LG hasn't announced when or if that robot will actually be for sale. The most jaw-dropping demo of the year doesn't have a price tag or a ship date.
And that tension between the demo and the reality is exactly where we are as an industry. The vision is clear, the path is real, the timeline is the honest question.
So here's the thing to sit with after this episode. A robot that can open your fridge, make your breakfast, and fold your laundry already exists. It just doesn't have a production date yet. The question isn't whether robots move into our homes. The market data, the technological trajectory, and the investment all say they will. The question is whether our laws, our ethics, and honestly our own expectations are going to be ready when they show up at the door. That's the conversation worth having right now, while we still have time to shape it. Thanks for listening to Co-Pilot Podcasts.